Krishna devotees, dear devotees, and welcome back again to our continuing series on the glories of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Happy to be back with everybody again. Let's begin as we always do. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarane. I found another beautiful verse which I'll share with you from Hari Bhakti Vilas 1:102. Triyashvabho Jagannatha Guru Shamshara Vanina Dhagnambab Kala Dashtam Cha Twamaham Sharanam Gata. O Lord of the universe, O Gurudev, please deliver me, your disciple who is burning due to the fire of material existence and who is bitten by the snake of time. I take complete shelter of you. All glories to Prabhupada. So, last week we began a short series on the glories of Govardhan Hill. You remember we began with a little summary of how, on Krishna's request, Nanda Maharaj and the residents of Vrindavan gave up their age-old tradition of offering sacrifice to Lord Indra, and instead offered a very elaborate sacrifice and feast to Govardhan Hill on Krishna's request. And you may all remember the amazing deity on the hill. So today we'll begin with the next item or pastime of Govardhan Leela, and that is Krishna's taking all the vrajavasis on parikrama around Govardhan Hill. We can't do parikrama now because of the COVID, but we'll do it through Shabda Brahma. And that parikrama, you could say that was the very first Govardhan Parikrama. Well, it was the very first Govardhan Parikrama. The act of doing Govardhan Parikrama is very, very dear to all Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, in particular Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So hopefully we can learn a few tips today on how to improve our Govardhan Parikramas. And here's a beautiful verse from the Garuda Purana. I think it's the 3rd canto, chapter 8, text 14, to inspire us on our parikrama today. Giriraja vibhutam cha yashnoti narotama sakajet dhamma paranam golokam yogi durlabham. One who hears about the glories and opulence of Govardhan Hill becomes the best of persons and goes to Goloka, the supreme abode, which even the greatest yogis cannot attain. Giriraj, Hideho. So after the Annakuta festival, remember the big feast they had after the sacrifice for Krishna, for Govardhan Hill, Nanda Maharaj, he turned towards the cowherd men and he signaled them to begin walking around Govardhan Hill the first time. It had the feast, big feast. They ate all the Mahaprasad from Giriraja Govardhan. They took a nap, and then Nanda Maharaj said, everybody up, we're going to walk around Govardhan Hill, Parikrama. So it's noteworthy that the vrajavasis, they proceeded in a certain order. First came the white cows, then the other cows, and then the brahmanas, and they were all loudly chanting Vedic mantras. Then the community leaders, then the leaders' assistants, and after the assistants came the wives of the leaders, then the young gopis, then the maidservants, and then the artisans of various skills, and finally all the forest animals. They also tagged along, it's described. Now, along with the cows were very skilled drummers playing on their drums. And some of the cowherd boys in the procession, they had their sticks. Cowherd boys always have sticks and little bugles, etc. So they were wielding their sticks in fancy patterns, like this. And they drove on, it's described, the surging waves of white and colored cows. And behind the boys followed another group of talented musicians playing flutes and venas. And behind them were honey-voiced singers. And following the singers were row upon row of very beautiful dancing girls. And other women sat in elaborately decorated and ornamented bullock carts. And they were just singing about Krishna's pastimes. You see that in the villages in Braj. Ladies will be doing work, whatever, around the house or the farm, and they're very often singing. Well, the men also sing, but that's the spiritual world. Every step is a dance, every word is a song, and there's a festival every day. So, they were all singing. You can hardly imagine that type of kirtan from the hearts of the vrajavasis, who had pure devotion for Krishna. Actually, in Srimad Bhagavatam, the ladies of Mathura, they glorify these Brajagopis just for their singing. 10th canto, 44th chapter, verse number 15. So beautiful. The Mathura Vasis, the ladies, they sing, quote, or they say, quote, "The ladies of Braja are the most fortunate of women because with their minds fully attached to Krishna and their throats always choked up with tears, they constantly sing about him while milking the cows, winnowing grain, churning butter, gathering cow dung for fuel, riding on swings, taking care of their crying babies, sprinkling the ground with water, cleansing their houses, and so on. By their exalted Krishna consciousness, they automatically acquire all desirable things." Nice glorification of the Mathura Vasis for the Brajavasis. Now the acaryas have commented that while the brahmanas were chanting Vedic mantras, it was a serious affair. But the singing of these gopis was very fun-loving. When the brahmanas were chanting Vedic mantras, it was very serious. But the singing of these ladies of Braj, the acaryas describe, very fun-loving. Now Krishna and Balaram themselves, they were situated towards the very front of the procession, close to the cows. It's described they were, quote, "swaggering with the gait of young elephants as their friends swarmed around them like bumblebees." Govardhan Parikrama ki. What's more, the acaryas write that Krishna himself, towards the front there, mixed with his cows, he appeared like a transcendental rainbow resting upon an autumn cloud. His limbs were dusky colored, his garments were of a golden color, and his body paintings were vermilion colored, and his ornaments were white, green, and red. So he carried a rope on his shoulder, and he had a flute tucked under his belt. Let me see if I can remember. He was chasing stray cows, and he was also twirling a stick, an effulgent stick, it's described, that he repeatedly tossed in the air and then caught it before it hit the ground. Now Radharani is also mentioned in that parikrama, that she was surrounded by her elders, and thus she had to keep her face covered. But occasionally she would peek throughout the veil and would see Krishna's stick flying around. She'd just see the stick in the air. And it said in this way she kept track of where her beloved Lord was. She just peek out and see the stick flying. Oh, Krishna's there. Now, at different places along the parikrama path around Govardhan Hill, Nanda Maharaj would be, he'd be giving charity to the Brahmins. And this pleased Krishna very much. Krishna in return would offer his father a sidelong loving glance, it's described. He was pleased. His father's giving charity to the Brahmins. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Hitaya Cha. Brahmins and cows are very dear to the Lord. So Krishna would show that he was pleased by a loving, sidelong glance. And that made his father very happy. I was thinking it doesn't take much to please Krishna's devotees. A simple loving glance from Krishna is more than enough. Lord Shiva, one of the greatest devotees of Srimati Radharani, composed an entire poem or prayer begging for the sidelong glance of Sri Radha. Now we say he's one of the greatest devotees of, we know he's the greatest Vaishnavanam Vita Shambhu, he's the greatest devotee of Krishna, but I say he's one of the greatest devotees of Srimati Radharani because we know because of the beautiful poem or prayer that he composed. It's very clear who's dear to his heart. That prayer is called the Sri Sri Radha Kripa Kataksha Stave Raja. It means the prayer for the merciful sidelong glance of Srimati Radharani. I know I became familiar with this prayer as early as, 1973 or 74. When I first came to India, I remember that in the early morning in Vrindavan, you'd always hear that the girls going to school, they'd all walk together to school, the village girls, they'd all sing that song. It didn't matter where I was in Vrindavan, in the morning hours, I'd always hear the school children, and they'd sing it with so much love and devotion to Radharani. You still hear it today, especially you hear it out at Radhakund when devotees go to bathe in the sacred Radhakund. It's traditional that everyone, men, women, and children, they sing that beautiful song composed by Lord Shiva. And we won't repeat the song now, but we have to move on. But do listen to that. Shri Shri Radha Kripa Kataksha Stave Raj. Prayers for the merciful sidelong glance of Srimati Radharani. And there's, I believe, 13 stanzas, and 11 of them end with the line, Kada Karisha Sihamam Kripa Kataksha Bhajanam. O Goddess, when will you cast your merciful sidelong glance upon me? So there we hear again the sidelong glance. The devotee is praying, just please, just glance at me. As Krishna did to his father. Now, I know many of my God brothers and God sisters who remember Srila Prabhupada just glancing or looking at them. It's quite common if you talk to Prabhupada disciples. Some of them only had a moment's association with Prabhupada perhaps, but they'll say that they say when Prabhupada looked at them, it was as if he was looking directly into their hearts, that he could understand them. Prabhupada just looking. Many times the disciples say, Prabhupada looked at me and he knew exactly who I was. And they felt blessed. Powerful glance of the Lord or his pure devotee. And all these years later, they remember those special moments, that glance. Deva Shaitani Tirthani, Darshana Sparsha Nar Chanai, Shanai Punanti Kalina, Tad Apyartha Mekshaya. This is a beautiful verse from the 10th canto. Quote, one can gradually become purified by seeing, touching, and worshipping temple deities, places of pilgrimage, and holy rivers. But one can attain the same result immediately simply by receiving the glance of exalted sages. Wow. That's 1082:52. I want to recite that again. This reminds me of Prabhupada. One can gradually become purified by seeing, touching, and worshipping temple deities, places of pilgrimage, and holy rivers. But one can attain the same result immediately simply by receiving the glance of exalted sages. There, it's also mentioned touching. temple deities, places of pilgrimage, holy rivers, and obviously the same holds true for touching a pure devotee or having him touch you. It's also enough to feel his blessings. I remember Srila Prabhupada, he was arriving at our Detroit temple in 1971, and we'd all gathered outside. You know, the car would come up, and then there'd be two lines from the car up to the temple, entrance to the temple building. We all lined up there. And I remember that devotees were, as Prabhupada came out of the car and was walking towards the temple, devotees were leaning over like this, leaning over as Prabhupada walked by, hoping that his divine grace might touch their heads. And he did. He would sometimes touch like that. Or he'd sometimes give flowers, whatever. Anything from the hand of Srila Prabhupada was priceless. Devotees keep those flower petals. I know there was an artik Srila Prabhupada did to Radha Paris Ishwara on one occasion. It may have been the installation, or it may have been the next year when Prabhupada came, but I was nearby, and our temple president, Bhagavan Das, he was given that flower that Prabhupada offered to the deities, and he gave it to me. So I dried it out, and the petals, and every day when I go in Sankirtan, I'd take a little of that flower petal as prasadam from Prabhupada's hand. And my god sister, Shilavati, she was a very well-known, very famous, respected devotee. I remember in the beginning of the movement, she was a pujari. And devotees learned many things from her about how to be a pujari. But in her memoirs of Srila Prabhupada, she recounted a similar occasion where Prabhupada would touch the heads of his disciples. I can't remember what temple she was talking about, but it was a temple where Prabhupada was visiting. And now, I have those memoirs, so I'll just repeat what she said. Quote, so nice. Devotees would line up along the steps and the walkway to Prabhupada's car. Prabhupada would come out and he would be smiling. All the devotees would bow down and then kneel as he came by. And he would put his hand on everyone's head as he went by. Everyone was just waiting for Srila Prabhupada to touch their head. And if he would miss someone, she said, when he went by, then that person would run around and get at the end of the line somehow or other so that Prabhupada would touch his head or her head. And she says, I know he knew what was going on when they did that, but he was just smiling. And sometimes he would just make a point to touch everyone's head as he went by, and sometimes he would only touch 2 or 3 people the whole time. It was just a game that we all played. Then he would get into the car, and everyone would just converge on the car. And then after he left, everyone had something to say, like, did you see him do this? Did you hear him say this? Everyone was happy about Srila Prabhupada. We would always talk about him. He was the center of our lives. It's so true. I also remember one time in the Paris temple, Srila Prabhupada was visiting us. This was the first temple, I believe, at Fontenay-aux-Roses, a little bit outside the city, a small little building. Prabhupada came, he just lit the building up. And he was visiting us, and each morning he would come down from his quarters upstairs on the first floor, down the steps, into the temple room to give class. And he would be wearing very soft house slippers. And my very dear godbrother, Bugarbha Das, who I have not seen in many years, he would sit by the temple room door and very carefully he'd take off Prabhupada's slippers as Prabhupada entered the temple room. And one morning, Bugarbha was late. So as Srila Prabhupada came to the entrance to the temple room, I rushed forward and I took his slippers off. And I remember during the class, I kept them very close to me. And when the lecture was over, I went quickly to the exit. And as Prabhupada came out, I carefully put those slippers back on his lotus feet. And when I finished, he touched my head, kind of rubbed my head a little bit, and he said, "Good boy." Good boy. Like this. Good boy. So that slight touch, that little blessing and those kind words kept me going to this very day. You remember these things, and they gave strength at that moment, and they gave spiritual strength throughout the years, and they give strength now. This is the nature of transcendence. It never diminishes. A blessing from a great soul never diminishes, especially if we take advantage of it. So the touch of the Lord's lotus feet, or that of his pure devotee, or their hand, or whatever, is the source of all auspiciousness. In the 11th canto, 7th chapter, verse 44, another beautiful verse. Svachap krititash nigdo madaryas tirthaburnam muni punat yapam mitram ikshopas parsha kirtanai. O king, a saintly person is just like water because he is free from all contamination, gentle by nature, and by speaking creates a beautiful vibration like that of flowing water. Just by seeing, touching, or hearing such a saintly person, the living entity is purified just as one is cleansed by contact with pure water. Thus a saintly person, just like a holy place, purifies all those who contact him because he always chants the glories of the Lord. Indication of his purity, that he's always chanting. I know when I had the opportunity a few times to travel with Prabhupada, I noticed one thing, that he was always chanting. Obviously he was always absorbed in Krishna consciousness, or how to spread the movement, or even the management, but it's all Krishna conscious. But remember, we were flying from New York to London in 1971 or 72, and I had the good fortune to sit next to Prabhupada, and I was wondering, like, I was a little nervous on the flight, like, what am I going to do? What am I supposed to do? And I said, just be very respectful, very careful, and, always be Krishna conscious. But I noticed Prabhupada, he was always like, much of the flight he was chanting, Hare Krishna, Rama, Rama, Hare. You could hear him chanting. But then sometimes I heard him saying, Chintamani pakada sadavasu kalpa viksha laksha viteshu surabhira vibhavi. He's like looking around, chanting Brahma Samhita, or looking out the window and Harinam, Kevalam, Nashdeva. So like that. Thus, that verse says, thus a saintly person, just like a holy place, purifies all those who contact him because he's always chanting the glories of the Lord. So that all came from the glance that Krishna gave his Pita, his father, because his father pleased him by giving charity to the Brahmanas. So as this first Govardhan Parikrama moved along, Krishna's sidelong loving glance pleased Nanda Maharaj very much, and Kavi Karnapura. He describes the parikrama from that point on. There's not a lot about that parikrama. I'm sharing as much as I could find. Perhaps more other devotees may know, obviously, more, but this is all that I found. Kavi Karnapura describes that the parikrama from that point on, he describes it in his Ananta Vrindavan Champu. He writes that as the parikrama proceeded, these are his exact words, quote, in accordance to scriptural injunctions, the vrajavasis gave charity to brahmanas at different places, like we heard, while going around Giriraj. Then it is impossible to find a suitable container to hold the unlimited bliss that the vrajavasis felt during their parikrama of Giriraj. Even though tiny in size, the soul can enjoy immeasurable happiness. Wow. Even though tiny in size, the soul can enjoy immeasurable happiness. As a result, their souls drowned in inconceivable joy. The continuous music of the dhakas and kettle drums, which are famous on heaven and earth, increased the bliss of the parikrama. So I was thinking that, they're going in parikrama and they're having kirtan. I know many times when I do Govardhan Parikrama, we just go around and I'll take photos or whatever. But you see the old vrajavasis, some of those old sadhus. They're going around, they're chanting the whole way. In fact, a couple of years ago when we were doing a Govardhan Parikrama, we met one sadhu. And he was chanting so beautifully, so we recorded him. And sometimes when I'm doing my puja for my deities, I play his recording of all the kind of the traditional vrajavasi songs. And that's music. There's so many attempts through the ages and nowadays that sometimes the music sounds like noise. Oh, it is noise. But just one sadhu, just his hand was like this to keep the time. His singing, perfection of all music. No orchestra, no instruments, no chorus, just him. Because he was singing from the heart about Braj. And I recorded it, I got the recording. I was so grateful and I shared it with many devotees. Just this Babaji in his loincloth, a little chadar, and his mala, chanting so happy. That's the perfection. Chanting the glories of Giriraja, of Radhesham, doing Govardhan Parikrama. I believe Charatma Prabhu was with me, and he was in ecstasy. He's a Govardhan Bhakta, Charatma Prabhu. So we remember those times. So it took a number of hours until the Parikrama was finished and had returned to the original place of the sacrifice. So there all the Vrajavasis, it's described they heard songs and music and watched graceful dance performances. They had entertainment. And we know for sure that entertainment was reenacting Krishna's pastimes. The Vrajavasis, in the presence of Krishna, would reenact his pastimes, because he was the be-all and end-all of their existence. When Krishna left Vrindavan and went to Mathura, there's a description of how the gopis, they dealt with that vipralamba bhav, that intense longing for Krishna. They would reenact his pastimes. They would, one gopi would, pretend to be Govardhan Hill and lift the hill. Others would come under and killing the Pralambasura demon and like that. So we do. We reenact those pastimes too. And I know on our Festival of India, the Polski tour, for the people, perhaps the most entertainment is when we do the theater. We try to do it very first class, very professional, with the best outfits, the best sound. But really the essence of it is it's Krishna Lila. And it does touch people's hearts. Just to remember it, Shmaranam, is one of the processes of Krishna consciousness. So I remember one time, I've told the story before, but I could never forget it, that we did a play, Krishna in Vrindavan, and I believe we had a very beautiful puppet. It looked like Krishna, like a young Krishna, and it was very nicely played by the person who was using that puppet. I remember that people really applauded. It was straight Krishna Lila, I think Krishna killing a few demons and dancing with the gopis or something. And afterwards we had this huge crowd, and they applauded, and then there was a silence, like waiting for the next performance. And just when we finished, one little girl was sitting on her mother's lap. She must have been 6 or something like that. And she stood up on her mother's lap. She said, "Mommy, I want Krishna. Mommy, I want Krishna." Where, she's just a child, what does she know? No. Somehow or other, something there, the object of her affection is the absolute truth. So who can say that there's something, you can't deny something was there. I want Krishna. We're in the same position. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. We're not pure devotees yet, we're not crying, but there's some affection there. There's some appreciation, then there's some affection, and then there's love. It starts out with appreciation. Mommy, I want Krishna. So like when times were difficult sometimes, collecting for the funds for the Polish tour, or even, managing it and organizing 300 devotees for 2 months, sometimes got a little tough. The wind, the rain, whatever. I just remember that little girl, closed my eyes. Mommy, I want Krishna. It made it all worth it. So this is what vrajavasis do. And that's the purpose of our tour, is to engage, give people the taste for Krishna consciousness. We have our festivals, Rath Yatra, we have our Radhastami, we have our Janmastami, and these are our devotee festivals. But my favorite festivals are the festivals for the people, where we're just in the background serving them, so they get their experience. They chant, they take prasadam, they buy a book, they watch the theater. Mommy, I want Krishna. That's preaching, when you see the people getting the taste for Krishna consciousness. So the vrajavasis, they were watching graceful dance performances. And then it's described after some time they laid down to rest. They did a whole Govardhan Parikrama, then they had some entertainment. And they had a big feast, and then they did Govardhan Parikrama, and then they saw some entertainment. So then it's described, it actually says, happily lay down to rest. And one acharya comments, in their sleep, the vrajavasis dreamt of Govardhan Hill and of Krishna's pastimes during the Annakuta festival, where they offered prasad to the Lord, or bhoga to the Lord. And of course, he said they also dreamt about the very first Govardhan Parikrama. He says, led by the transcendental brothers Krishna and Balaram. Now the day after Govardhan Puja, or the tradition is sometimes 2 days after Govardhan Puja festival, is the Bhattari Vitiya festival. The Bhattari Vitiya festival, which is when brothers and sisters show their love for each other. It's a festival in Braj. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes that to observe this festival, the vrajavasis went to the shores of the Jamuna River next to Govardhan Hill. I read, what? Govardhan Hill is far away. But he writes, he mentions that the Jamuna River actually used to flow very near Govardhan Hill. So to observe this festival, they went there. Now the history of this Bhattari Vitiya festival is actually fascinating. It's described in Shruti scriptures in great detail. There it's mentioned that one time Yamaraj left his abode of Yamalok. We know that's where we don't want to go. That's Yamaloka, where he's responsible for punishing sinful persons who have died. He left there in order to visit his twin sister, Jamuna. Yamuna and Yamaraj are twins, actually, born to the sun god, Vivishwan, and his wife, Saugja. No, they're twins. Yamaraj and Yamuna are twins. It's a whole pastime. I think I told it some months ago, but just in summary. So Yamaraj and Yamuna, they're sometimes referred to as Yama and Yami. Yama and Yami. So Yami, meaning Yamuna, she received her brother Yamaraj, by placing a dot of sandalwood paste upon his forehead, offering him the facility for a bath, some new clothes, and she cooked a wonderful feast. He left Yamaloka to visit his sister. And after being received so nicely, Yama said to Yami, "My dear sister, I am your brother. I am duty bound to protect you, facilitate you. Please ask from me any benediction that you want." So Yamuna, she replied, "Yes, my dear brother, I have a request of you. Please give me the benediction that whenever brothers and sisters take bath in my waters together after Govardhan Puja, they'll become freed from your jurisdiction. What does that mean? It means, well, freed from birth and death, that they would achieve eternal life in the spiritual world. So Yamaraj, it's a big request. So Yamaraj thought for a moment. I mean, she's a Vaishnavi, obviously, she's concerned about others. So Yamaraj thought for a moment, then he said, Tatashtu, let it be. Then Yamaraj asked Yamuna a question. He said, but my dear sister Yamuna, what about those people who don't have a brother or sister? So Yamuna thought for a minute and she replied, well, on that special day, they can accept someone as their brother or sister, and they can bathe in my waters together, and they'll get the same benefit. So if you don't have a brother or sister, you can accept someone who's close to you as a brother, as a sister, bathe. You get the same benefit. Freed from the jurisdiction of, who would not want to be freed from the jurisdiction of a Yamaraj? Everyone's afraid of death. So that happens by the process of devotional service, and we can understand how so, because Yamaraj, he's one of the 12 Mahajans. He's one of the authorities on pure devotional service, so he's certainly capable. So Yamaraj thought for a moment, and he said, Tatashtu, so be it. So from that day on, brothers and sisters, we're going way back here. From that day on, brothers and sisters bathe in the Jamuna River, especially at Vishramagat, just after Govardhan Puja. And I've witnessed that festival. The brothers give sweets and saris to their sisters, and the sisters give their brothers coconuts. And I read something really interesting yesterday, because I was really trying to get in to find out more about this particular Bhartri Vitiya festival. And I read that it's also said that for the duration of that festival, deceased souls in the realm of Yamaraj may, if they have sisters to host them, visit the world of the living. Wow. There's so many interesting things in Vedic scripture. You could just, it's like a gold mine or a treasure chest. You just seek it and you shall find, the Bible says. You'll always find something interesting. Deceased souls in Yamaloka, the realm of Yamaraj, if they have brothers or sisters to host them in this world, they can visit the world of the living, as long as that festival is going on. Interesting little detail. And the Shruti Shastras stress that the main features of this festival, if you want to come to Vrindavan and you're here after Govardhan Puja, 1 or 2 days depending, and you go with your sister or someone you've chose, a sister or brother, Shruti Shastra says that the main features of the festival are bathing in the Jamuna and eating a lavish feast. The word is used, lavish feast. So Yamuna Devi is so kind. She's so kind that she's a true Vaishnavi, that she's always thinking about the spiritual welfare of others, that they can be released from the clutches of Yamaraj by asking him, a great Mahajan, to enlighten them, you could say, in the process of Krishna consciousness, and encourage them to take up the process of Krishna consciousness and go back home, back to Godhead. So she's very kind. Actually, her kindness, her glories, let us say, are so nicely described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 3:28. We hear her glories. Chidananda Bhano Shada Nanda Shuno Paraprema Patri Dhrava Brahmagatri Aganam Lavitri Jagat Shema Dhatri Vivitri Kriya no Vapur Mitra Putri. It's stated, O River Jamuna, you are the blissful spiritual water that gives love to the son of Nanda Maharaj. You are the same as the water of the spiritual world, for you can vanquish all our offenses and the sinful reactions incurred in life. You are the creator of all auspicious things for the world. O daughter of the sun god, kindly purify us by your pious activities. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. So the Vrajavasis carefully observed this festival. I explained the history of the festival, how it came about, but there they were ready to observe this festival on the banks of the Yamuna, flowing next to Govardhan Hill. Wow. And they did. I even read that Krishna participated in the festivities that day. I was reading that Sunanda Gopi, the daughter of Upananda, invited Krishna, who's actually her cousin brother. She asked Krishna to celebrate the festival with her. So they did. Took a bath and had a lavish feast. And seeing that affectionate exchange, it's described, Shrimati Radharani placed a dot of sandalwood paste on her brother, Sridham, on his forehead. She offered him a garland and sweets, and then bowed down before him with great respect. So we can follow Krishna and Radha and the Vrajavasis. They are the ones we're following. And then Sridham gave Shri Radha new silk cloth and jewelry. And after all was said and done, the Vrajavasis enjoyed that huge feast that we've mentioned, as per the custom. And Sunanda Gopi arranged for Krishna and his friends to be served many tasty dishes, during which funny Madhu Mangal said, "O Krishna, what a foolish creator we have. Had he made every day of the year Bhartri Dvitiya, and had he given you more sisters like Sunanda Gopi, we could then constantly enjoy delectable feasts like this today." Madhu Mangal loves to eat. He must have enjoyed that Anukut Prasad offered to Giriraj. And then, when they came back around after the Govardhan Parikrama, and then the next 2 days later, this feast in honor of the brothers and sisters' loving exchanges, Madhu Mangal. Oh Krishna, what a foolish creator we have. Had he made every day of the year Bhartri Dvitiya, and had he given you more sisters like Sunanda Gopi, we could then enjoy constantly delectable feasts like this today. So with that, all the Vrajavasis happily returned to their homes, all the while talking about the glories of Krishna and Balaram. Now, I'm going to move on here. The plot thickens, or it gets thick. During all these special events, the Yajna for Giriraj, the Anukut festival, Govardhan Parikrama, and the Bhartri Dvitiya festival, Narada Muni had been informing Lord Indra that the original Indra Yajna had been replaced by all the festivities that we've mentioned. And as Narada Muni was sharing this information with Indra, he was seated in an assembly of very powerful devatas and beautiful apsaras, or heavenly girls. And it's described that this news that Narada Muni shared with Indra caused Indra to develop a terrible headache, for which even the Asvini physicians, meaning the doctors of Svargaloka, they had no cure. The biggest migraine headache in the history of creation. He was so angry. We heard the other day how angry he became. So we know that Indra foolishly decided to take revenge against Krishna, Nanda Maharaj and all the Vrajavasis, including even the cows. I was reading, in a rage, he immediately called for the Samvartaka clouds. In Krishna book we hear about the Samvartaka clouds, and they're responsible for universal destruction. So he said to them, "O faithful servants, O powerful clouds, able to destroy the 14 planetary systems. If you are truly loyal to me, then hear what I have to say and act accordingly. The coward men of Vrindavan, headed by their king, Nanda, have stopped worshipping me at the instigation of a little boy called Krishna, whom they have accepted as their only shelter and support. It's really envious. He says, he continues, overtaken by false pride, they have abandoned worship of me in favor of worshiping a mountain called Govardhan. Thus they have offended me, whom the goddess of fortune, or rather they say, the goddess of learning constantly praises. He says like that. They've offended me, who the goddess of learning, Saraswati, constantly praises. I therefore order you to let loose incessant rains upon Vrindavan and destroy the cows. The milk those cows produce is the sole means of livelihood for that King Nanda and his followers. This is demoniac. Actually, the great saint Suradas, we visited his samadhi a couple years ago, Chanda Surovara. He's given a very detailed description in his writings. He writes that Indra said to the Samvartaka clouds, this really gets bad. This is what Suradas says. Indra said, my dear devastating clouds, firstly, go and destroy Govardhan Hill. Cut him into small pieces. Destroy him with Vajra. Vajra means thunderbolts. V-A-J-R-A. And throw the chunks down into the lower planets, which lie at the deepest nether regions of the universe. As for those who have worshipped Govardhan Hill with so much enthusiasm, they should also be killed, including first and foremost Nanda Maharaj. And I command you all, after this is all done, completely destroy the land of Vrindavan as well, so that no one will know that there was ever a place like it on the earth. He's a Devata, but he lost it. Totally lost it. There was pride there was envy there, anger. Lust, anger, and greed, Krishna says, these are the three gates leading to downwards to hell. But anyway, so the Samvartaka clouds, they went to Braj, and they were accompanied by 7 great winds, I read, such as Avaha, who presides over the region of Burvarloka, and Pravaha. Pravaha is the wind that holds all the planets in their places. I think scientists say it's gravity. That may or may not be true, obviously, but Shastra says that this wind, Pravaha, really is what holds the planets in their places. It's really interesting. And all these dark, black, ominous clouds covered the sky above Vrindavan, and then expanded themselves and started to roar. How does a cloud roar? With thunder and rain. How does rain roar? Well, when it hits your roof, it sounds like a roar. Where I'm staying, we have a very flimsy roof, aluminum roof, and when it rained the other day, it sounded like thunder. And all of this rain that was following, it was forming. It was described as falling in massive columns that fell to the earth, forming turbulent rivers and overflowing lakes in Vrindavan's, causing overflowing lakes in Vrindavan's pasture lands, hills and forests. And as the clouds became increasingly thicker, they dropped hailstones the size of boulders, and winds tore at mountains. Winds tore apart mountains and uprooted trees. And most seriously, the acaryas say, the 12 directions scattered like dry leaves, making it impossible to discern what was north, south, east, or west, up or down. Sounds like the mother of all tornadoes or something, hurricanes. It's also described that intense lightning and oppressive darkness alternated in quick succession so as to blind all creatures. Dark, light, dark, light. Just like when I'm speaking here, Mahavan has these bright lights for the recording. And if I look over there, and then I've become blind, I can't see the computer. Little point there where I look in the computer screen for the filming. I can't see it. I just looked over there now. So this intense lightning and oppressive darkness alternated in such quick succession as to blind all creatures. Birds were being repeatedly thrown to the ground by high winds, and forest animals were miserable because they couldn't find any refuge from the pounding rains that shook their bodies. And feeling imminent destruction, the vrajavasis everywhere throughout Vrindavan, they prayed to Krishna, "O Lord of Gokul, please save the cows." First they said, "Please save the cows, now on the verge of death from the wrath of Indra. And since you are affectionate to your devotees, please save us as well." That says something. The cows were so dear to the vrajavasis because they're so dear to Krishna. And because Krishna and the cows and the vrajavasis are dear to us, the cows are also dear to us. And then, finally, to the relief of everyone, came a firm and assuring voice. It was Krishna, responding to the cries of his devotees. And he does respond to his devotees, even the younger devotees. Just like a mother, she has special affection for her baby child because the child is so dependent upon her. So Krishna responded. What did he say? He said, "My dear friends, no doubt this calamitous situation is the work of King Indra, but such adversity becomes insignificant and by my grace easily overcome for one who is surrendered to me." It reminds me of that verse in Bhagavad Gita, 1858, "Machita sarva dhurgani mat prasada tarishyasi ata chit tvam ahamkaran na shuroshasi vinakyasi." I think I got it right. "If you become conscious of me," Krishna says, "you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost." Now, as Krishna was speaking, he overheard his father nearby reciting, it's described, 46 names of Indra. His father, Nanda Maharaj. He was calling out 46 names of Indra, like Sachisa, Vrajahasta, Vajra, that thunderbolt hasta, hoping to appease the devata. Now, he's not aware of his son's divinity, we have to understand. He's not aware of who Krishna is. They're living in, a Vedic culture, you could say. That's the framework, but the inner part of that framework is just pure devotion to Krishna, which is enhanced by the fact they don't know Krishna's God. And it makes the relationships more intimate as friend, as lover, as child. But these social structures, you could say like a Vedic culture, so we can't fault Nanda Maharaj. He's calling out to the devatas, calling out to Indra, hoping to appease him. Stop all this. Not aware of his son's divinity, and he'd do anything to save his child. Such is the mood of Vatsalya Ras. But Krishna, upset by this plea a little bit, he explained, he said, "Father, must we pray to this Indra, whom I can pulverize into dust in a moment? Put aside your fear and watch my pastimes unfold as I crush this paltry insect's mountainous pride." My dear father, earlier we worshipped Govardhan Hill and he appeared in person to accept our offerings. Now let us again turn to that infallible deity. We called him in the last class the deity on the hill. And here he's being referred to, Krishna referring to him, that infallible deity. Then on Krishna's order, which quickly spread throughout Vrindavan by messengers, all the vrajavasis trudged through the wind and rain, because they're scattered throughout. They'd gone home at one point. After the festivals were over, that festival of down by the Jamuna, they'd gone back to their respective homes, and then the flood waters came and the rain came. So messengers went throughout Braj, and Krishna, through the messengers, he told everyone that they should come to the Anukut Kshetra. Kshetra means place. So the Anukut, where that big feast was offered to Giriraj, it's described the Vrajavasis trudged through the wind and rain to Anukut Kshetra and waited for further instructions from Krishna. Now during that time, Krishna consulted with his close friends like Stoka Krishna. And it was then and there that Krishna came up with the idea of using Govardhan Hill as an umbrella to give shelter to all the Vrajavasis. That's where the idea came from. He met with his cowherd friends, the boys. They all talked about it. What are we going to do? Krishna said, I'll lift the mountain and give shelter to the Vrajavasis. But his friends thought that trying to lift a mountain was too risky, and they refused to give their permission. Despite Krishna reminding them that he'd killed many demons in Vrindavan, one after another. But still they weren't impressed. So in an attempt to convince his cowherd friends that he did have the power to lift a mountain, Krishna joined two branches of a tree, twisted them together, and he made a large tree trunk. The boys were impressed. And that tree is still present. I saw it. There's a holy place in Braj, I can't remember the name, but we'll go there one day. That twisted trunk of a tree, it actually grew as a tree. That trunk still exists. It's not growing. It almost looks, it's just hardwood and up there like that, pretty high, but there's no leaves or anything. But you see, it's two trees twisted to make a trunk. And they have arti 7 times a day to that tree. They offer prasadam to that tree. Tadiya, that which is connected to Krishna, is divine. Very interesting darshan. So by that performance, by the Krishna's mystic powers, the boys were impressed. They finally gave permission. So it's described that without taking the time to even tighten his belt, which is Krishna's habit before confronting a challenge, we hear many times, Krishna approached the tail end of Govardhan Hill, that southern end we go around, that Giriraj is quite small, and with his hands he touched the southern portion of Govardhan Hill with great respect and put it to his head like that. And then as all the Vrajavasis looked on, Krishna walked and he disappeared into a cave into the mountain. And before any of the Vrajavasis had time to follow him, he began to lift the hill. He went in the cave. It's actually described in the center portion of Govardhan Hill. He must have walked there. Went into a cave. He disappeared. All of a sudden, everyone sees the Giriraj coming up. And Krishna's standing there. The mountain, the cave, the mountain, everything's up above. And the Vrajavasis watch in awe as the mountain rose into the air. And Krishna stood underneath that gigantic mountain, holding it up with one hand. That's God. There's so many pastimes to speak about Govardhan Hill. So many things, even rasic things, many rasic things that can be said. But I remember Prabhupada would sometimes say that if some foolish person claims to be God, then he has to prove it by holding up Govardhan Hill with one hand. I heard Prabhupada say one time in Hyderabad, he said, in Kali Yuga there's an incarnation of God on every street corner in Bombay, in those days especially, claiming to be God. But here's the criteria to lift a mountain. I remember once one of my godbrothers publicly challenged a popular yogi who had come to the West declaring he was Krishna, he was God, Ram. So my godbrother actually had a darshan with him, and he challenged him. He said, "Sir, if you're God, you please lift a mountain like Krishna did." So upon hearing the challenge, that yogi paused for a few moments and he said, "So, you see, I'm doing it." My godbrother just laughed. He said, "You're not lifting anything. You're not lifting a hill." So the yogi said, you can't see because I'm not giving you the eyes to see. You can't see because I'm not giving you the eyes to see how I'm lifting the mountain. Like I did Arjuna. I told Arjuna, "Natu mam shakyashe dhashtam aninaiva svachak shusha divyam dadami te chakshu." Chakshu means to see. Pasya me yogam aishvaryam. You cannot see me, Arjuna, with your present eyes. Therefore I give you divine eyes by which you can behold my mystic opulence. So the yogi said, "I'm not giving you divine eyes. I'm Krishna, but I'm not going to give you divine eyes because you're challenging me." This is Prabhupada. I'd like to use the word rascaldom. A rascal. Rascaldom. So there's one very important thing to say when we're talking about this whole Govardhan Leela. Prabhupada would use that. So Krishna stood there holding the hill, and soon he addressed his mother and father and all the vrajavasis. He said, "O mother, O father, O saintly people, bring all your possessions and take shelter here." Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. This king of mountains is enjoying the bliss of floating in the air. He feels to me no heavier than a puff of cotton. I am not exerting myself in the least, so please stay calm and peaceful. Krishna said like that. But it's described, seeing the floodwaters continuing to inundate Braj, Krishna called for Lord Shesha and his suitor Sanchaka to come and help. And with the heat of 10 million suns, the suitor Sanchaka hovered above Govardhan Hill and either evaporated or spun the torrents of rain that were coming down away from the sacred mount. So that spot where that happened, where that Sudra Sanchaka, that happened near the Manasi Ganga lake at Govardhan Hill. And that's where Srila Sanatana Goswami chose one of his favorite bhajan kutirs. He would do bhajan kutir there. He would do bhajan at that bhajan kutir at Manasi Ganga. He actually left the world from that sacred place. And the Ananta Shesh coiled himself on the ground around the Govardhan Hill and kept the floodwaters from coming too close. But neither the Sheshnag or the Sudar Sanchaka were visible to the Vrajavasis, who just saw this happening like, what's going on here? How is this? Is Krishna holding up the hill? Seeing the great mountain hovering above them? By the mystical touch of the beloved Krishna. Then Krishna loudly proclaimed, "O residents of Vrindavan, you can now come beneath Govardhan Hill along with your cows and possessions. Beneath the hill you will be safe from this terrible storm as no rain or mud can enter. In fact, I have made this place like a subterranean heavenly kingdom that you can easily access by the broad stairways you now see becoming manifest." Just imagine. The area, Krishna's standing, the hills above him, but that whole area underneath the hill, it turned into a subterranean heavenly kingdom. There's a storm raging everywhere, but there's warmth and light, beautiful trees and lakes and streams and birds and deers and water buffaloes and cows and everything. And it appeared that you could approach it through very broad stairways. And the Vrajavasis, they were stunned. It appeared to be even more opulent than the heavenly planets. And what's more, from a distance, it looked very calm and peaceful, and unaffected by the raging storm. So the acaryas say that the vrajavasis quickly started towards this huge valley under Govardhan Hill. It's very interesting. Not so much because they sought Krishna's protection, but because they desired, as always, to be near him, to serve him. Now, exactly what the vrajavasis were going to see in that subterranean heavenly kingdom, and what transpired there under that hill, it's the most amazing and extraordinary thing that ever happened in the history of the world. And all that we will describe in next Tuesday's class. Oh no, yes. There's just so much nectar. I want to kind of spread it out, let you digest all these transcendental truths, all these pastimes in Braj and Vrindavan, which are meant to just melt our hearts. And by them melting our hearts, we give up any foolish attraction to this material world, whatever it may be. These Braj Leela pastimes are meant to purify the heart just by sound vibration. Cheto dharpana marjanam. And slowly that little seed of pure devotion that's there in the heart. It's not something we have to get from some other source. It's already there in the heart. These pastimes also water that seed. Prabhupada describes that it grows and then it breaks through the coverings of the universe, then it gets to Vaikuntha and goes beyond this tree of Bhakti Lat Beach. This seed grows into a tree. It goes all the way to Goloka Vrindavan, where that love of Krishna wraps around the lotus feet of Krishna forever. The love that we have for Krishna. Nice description. So what happened as the vrajavasis entered into that subterranean heavenly kingdom? What transpired there? That we will share with you on Tuesday's class. Of course, you could say that all of Krishna's pastimes are the most amazing and an extraordinary thing that ever happened in the world. They're all like that. But there are many Govardhan Bhaktas who will dispute that, because for them, Giriraja Govardhan is everything. But all Vrajavasis, they have one thing in common. They're mad for Krishna, his devotional service, and his abode, that transcendental abode of Sri Vrindavan Dham. And this has been true for the last 5,000 years. So many devotees we hear about. They are our heroes. Everyone needs a hero. We need someone who inspires us, how they contradict the odds and they become number one in some field, whatever activity, but in this world. But the real heroes are the ones who Daiviyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Dharatya. Krishna says this divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is very difficult to overcome, Arjuna. But those who surrender to unto me can easily overcome it. So it's a difficult thing to overcome this material energy. And if someone's doing it, that person's our hero. They give us faith that we can do it. Because they're always so kind, they look back and they give us a helping hand. That's Vaishnava. So it's nice to look into the past and hear about the lives of great devotees, like they did it, you can do it. Even Krishna encourages us to look into the past and study the lives in the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and throughout the Vedic literatures of those who made it. It gives us faith that we can also make it. In Kali Yuga, we have Jagai and Madai. They made it by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nayanga, the combined form of Radha and Krishna. So we can look to the past. Krishna says so. 4th chapter, 15th verse of the Gita. Evam shatva kritam karma purvai api mamuk shubhi kuru kormaiva tasmat tvam purvai purva taram kritam. Krishna says, all the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, you should perform your duty, following in their footsteps. As the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of Krishna consciousness, of my transcendental nature, Arjuna, you should perform your duty following in their footsteps. We're meant to follow in the footsteps of advanced devotees. I mentioned that the other day, that in a letter Prabhupada wrote me, he said, chant your 16 rounds, follow the four regulative principles, and always follow in the footsteps of advanced devotees. So I'm very fortunate. I have so many very advanced godbrothers and god sisters who inspire me in so many ways, because it seems every devotee seems to embody one or more of certain aspects of Krishna consciousness that really can inspire us. You could look to a number of godbrothers and god sisters. And also younger devotees, how they take to Krishna consciousness so seriously. Our youth, we're doing an initiation in a few days, and a number of the initiates I met when they were just little children, knee-high to a grasshopper, we say, in America. Young, but they've stuck to the path of Krishna consciousness, and they've made the decision that they want to continue for the rest of their lives and beyond. So to see them taking initiation is such an inspiration in itself. Yes. So we need persons to whom who inspire us, and we do as they do. We hear from them and we follow their exemplary acts in devotional service. And of course, we all have the greatest inspiration, our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada. So we're following in his footsteps. In this age, this dangerous age of Kali Yuga, keep close to his lotus feet. One time a devotee said to Srila Prabhupada, I always want to be close to your lotus feet, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada kind of chuckled. He said, then you have to be very fast, because these lotus feet are traveling all over the world very quickly. So yes, I was reading about, or hearing about, a very advanced devotee. Amarendra Prabhu told this pastime a couple of months ago in America, and I listened very carefully, and I was inspired. He was relating how there was once a great devotee, a Rasik Vaishnava. This is back in the late 1400s, early 1500s, and this Rasik Vaishnava, his name was Rasa Khan. Rasa Khan, he lived in Vrindavan. And actually he came from an Islamic background. He was born in a Muslim family, a very prestigious Muslim family. And the whole family was going to the mosque, and, as our Muslim brothers and sisters do. They were worshipping Allah, Al-Akbar al-Mahundillah. So, but he came in contact with devotees in the area of Vrindavan, actually. In the area of Vrindavan. And by that association, he had a change of heart. And as a young man, very young man, he took to devotional service. My dad used to say, you take to something like a duck takes to water. He became a full-on surrendered devotee. You can read about his history in the Wikipedia. And he became one of the greatest and most respected vrajavasis poets ever. His samadhi is actually in Vrindavan. I think it's near Madhuvan. Very pure, exalted Vaishnava. And people love his poetry. His original name was Rajia Khan. It's the Islamic name, Rajia Khan. But because his poetry contains so much rasa, the Vaishnava community called him Rasa Khan. Not Rajia Khan, but they called him Rasa Khan. And they didn't change his name Khan, because I know from traveling very much in Islamic countries in my lifetime, Khan is a very well-known, respected name of Muslim families. But they kept the name because in Hindi, Khan can also mean like mine. Khan can also mean mine, so like gold mine. So Rasa Khan, he was like a mine of gold because of his pure heart and realizations we poured out in the form of his poetry. And in his old age, in his final poetry, he writes that he's getting old. And he's telling Krishna, if it's the Lord's desire, what he would like to be in his next life, in his poetry. He said, if it's your desire, Krishna, then if I have to take birth again, he says in Braj Bhasha language, Manush ho toy wahi rakshan bhasu braj gokul konki kwaban. I think I got it right. My dear Lord, if in my next life I become a human, please bless me to be a cowherd girl in Gokula. Then Pahan ho sonto wahi giriko jokar chatra purandar kavan. When Indra was throwing a thunderbolt, he who became the umbrella for Braj, meaning Giriraja Govardhan, let me become a rock at his feet. Then Jao pasho hoy to kaha bashe mero charanoit nandake denu madjaran. I practiced this. And if I have to become an animal, then let me become a calf in Krishna's team in Nanda Baba's herd. If I have to become an animal, then make me a calf in Krishna's team in Nanda Baba's herd. Then he says, Krishna, if you say I cannot become any of those things, I can only become a bird, then Jao kaga ho tau bashero karo kalindi kul ki kadam ki dalan. If I become a bird, then make me a bird on the branch of a kadamba tree on the bank of the Jamuna River. So when I read that, when I heard that, I was like really inspired. If it take birth again, make it all connected to Braj. I don't care. That's how these Brajavasis, that's how sold out these Brajavasis are to the land of Vrindavan. Another Rasik devotee has written in the Brajavas language, Braja tyajek, Braj tyatike, mine kahi nahi jao. I will not go outside Vrindavan, even in my dreams. Braja tyatake, mine kahi nahi jao, rasik santam ke darshan bhao. Please forgive me, Vrajavasis, I'm trying. I want to become a Vrajavasi too. He writes, being in Vrindavan, I will associate with all the great Vaishnavas. Why? Jaga se priti hatai. Because that way, they will take away all my attachments to this world. And what then? Radhanam param sukdai. I got that one right. Radhanam param sukdai. Srimati Radharani's name will be the giver of transcendental happiness. If you take away everything from this world and you reawaken your devotion to the Lord, what are you left with? Radhanam param sukdai. Srimati Radharani's name will be giving me transcendental happiness. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhadari. And another Brajavasi poet, because I looked up a few. Braj ke Raj me Rekar Yamuna Jal Kar Pran Radhe Radhe Ratate Ratate Tansho Nikale Pran. He writes, I will live in the land of Vrindavan, and I will drink the water of the Jamuna. And the only thing I will aspire for at the time of death will be that I will be chanting Radhe, 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 Radhe as my soul leaves the body. So let us follow in the footsteps of such devotees. We know that all of our acaryas, our recent acaryas, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Gurkishordas Babaji Maharaj, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jagannath Das Babaji, going way, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and 6 Goswamis Vrindavan. They all spent time, actually, if you read their life histories, they would spend time between Navadvip Mayapur and Vrindavan, many of them. They'd go back and forth back and forth. They had their bhajan kutiras like this, back and forth from Mayapur, Vrindavan. So we have so many heroes that we can follow. And as those places were dear to them, they should become dear to us. More dear than our homeland. More dear than the city we were born in. More dear than anything that we did before we were devotees. We want to follow in their footsteps and make Vrindavan, really make it our real home. And develop a deep attachment for Govardhan Hill, then our lives will be perfect. Until then, we have a way to go. Until then, may Giriraja Govardhan protect us, as he did the residents of Vrindavan that one very special time. I'll finish with a beautiful verse from Padyavali by Srila Rupa Goswami. May Lord Krishna, who is a fresh rain cloud over Govardhan Hill, a new blue lotus in the Jamuna River, and a great tamal tree in Vrindavan forest, protect me from the threefold miseries of material existence. Srila Rupa Goswami ki. Wow, this was so nectarian. And I really look forward to the next class on Tuesday to share with you what we read in Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Baladev Vidyabhushana, many of the great commentators that Prabhupada drew knowledge from for his commentaries, and with the help of many of my illustrious godbrothers, I look forward to sharing with you what was that subterranean heavenly abode. Of course it was transcendental, but just to give us an idea what it was like. And what did the vrajavasis do there under the hill for 7 days as Krishna held it up? Our acaryas have revealed these things. I can't wait, and I'm sure you can't wait, but time goes quickly in Krishna consciousness. When you're doing something you like, time goes by very fast. When you're doing something you don't like, you're always looking at your watch. So it'll go by quickly, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Until then, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Goloka Vrindavan Dham ki, back home, back to Godhead ki. Take all the fallen conditions, so every single one of them, by Prabhupada's mercy, back to the spiritual world, where every step is a dance, every word is a song, as a festival every day. Hare Krishna, Jai Prabhupada.